The other novel I wanted to talk about for a minute that I just finished about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, is Star Wars Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed. This book is something else. It's it's the start of a trilogy. They're doing a trilogy of these books. I'm trying to think of where I should start with this. It's a little low on the ranking list for me. It takes place after Return of the Jedi, but before the Aftermath trilogy kind of picks up. And it starts really slow. And I mean, it drags for a while. Now, keep in mind, this is the start of a trilogy, the same way the first Aftermath book was. And it was a little slow at the same time, introducing all the characters, kind of setting up where the rest of the trilogy is going to go. That's what this book was doing. And you can tell. Like, it was really hard to kind of get through. Alexander Freed, I feel, went out of his way to purposefully, and when I tell you purposefully, I can back it up, purposefully come up with the most bizarre, hard to pronounce, out there names I've ever heard of in my life. I don't know why. It actually turned into a game while I was reading this book. There would be times I was sitting in the same room as Kirsty, and I was reading the first couple of chapters of this, and every time somebody was introduced with a name, I would be like, babe, check this one out. And I would try to pronounce the name. I would just show it to her in the book, and she would try to pronounce it. Some of them, you can kind of figure out the way they're pronounced. Others, Jesus Christ. I've got a couple of them as an example here I can lay out for you. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are some that are actually harder to pronounce than this, but I couldn't find them in the book up there. But they're really hard to pronounce. The main characters in this book, like Karen Adan, I'm assuming is how you say it. Karen, Caern. Erica Quell is the main character in this book. Kairos, I don't know. Will Lark, Nath Tencent, and then the one that really got me is Chas Nachchodik. When I'm reading a novel, if I come to a word, or a name, I should say, a name that I cannot pronounce, it takes me out of the book for a minute. Because when I read, I have to read every single word. Kind of like when I'm watching a movie. I can't sit and have a conversation with somebody while the movie's playing. If I'm watching the movie, I'm watching the movie, right? So when I'm reading a book, I'm reading a book. And when I get to a name I can't pronounce and I have to stop and slowly pronounce it, it takes me out of the story. When you're reading, you're picturing all this going on in your head. And, for me, I try to picture it like a Star Wars movie playing in my head while I'm reading it. And maybe sometimes there's music playing in my head. I know I'm weird. Don't judge me. But when it comes to a name like Chas Nachchodik that doesn't really roll off the tongue, and there were others that were worse. Believe me, there were others that were worse. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It takes you out for things. You have to stop and work your way through the name and then keep on going. And the reason I say it seems like he did it on purpose is because every single name in this book was something you had to stop and look at it for a second and go, okay. But, besides that, the book is mainly about Alphabet Squadron, obviously. Alphabet Squadron is made up of an X-Wing fighter, Y-Wing, A-Wing, B-Wing, and E-Wing. Those 5. And to build a squadron out of 5 different ships like that with 5 different combat capabilities is really hard, and you see that through this book. This book was mainly this squadron learning to be a squadron together instead of being on their own. You know what I mean? Learning how to work together. Every single one of them had their own personal reasons why they were after this TIE squadron called Shadow Wing. And that's the whole reason Alphabet Squadron was put together with these people with a vendetta, was to go out, sniff out Shadow Wing, and take them out. I'm not really big into starfighter combat in books. I don't know what it is. It's hard for me to kind of picture a lot of this stuff going on in my head. But this one was all right. Once you get into some of the space battles, it was quite a bit of fun to read. There was one part in this book toward the beginning that stood out to me. And this isn't no big spoiler in the book or anything like that. There's a point in this book, pretty close to the beginning, before Alphabet Squadron's ever formed, where Will Lark, he's the A-Wing pilot in this book, he's still with his old squadron before he goes to join Alphabet Squadron. Their main frigate has been damaged. They're being chased by the Empire. The Imperial frigate has been damaged. And their TIE fighters, Shadow Wing, are hovering around their ship protecting it. And the A-Wing Squadron is hovering around their ship protecting it. And they're out there for hours in a standstill in this nebula. And Will decides, just on a whim, to open up an unencrypted broadcast towards Shadow Wing to try to talk to some of the pilots. Just because they're pilots. That's something they have in common. And he puts a message out there, and he doesn't get a reply until like an hour later. And one of the TIE fighter pilots comes back and starts talking to him. Pilot to pilot. And for a minute, you think they're forgetting all about, New Republic, Remnant of the Empire. You think for a minute they completely forget about that. And the Imperial pilot's talking about the nebula they're in and the kind of the history of it and kind of the religion behind it for some of the indigenous species. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just comes over the radio and says, you're going to rot out here. I'm going to make sure you die out here. You're going to rot out here. And it made, the way it was written, made the hair stand up on my arm, like while I was reading, because it just switched. And it was really, really eerie to hear. And it was, I tried to put myself in that situation hearing something like that, and it gave me bone chills. So some of the writing in this book is fantastic. Some of it it's all right. But the main point of the story, like I said, Erica Quell is the main character in it. She's kind of the one forming Shadow Squadron. She's an Imperial defector. And Karen Adan, who is with New Republic Intelligence, comes and busts her out of this outpost that the New Republic has called Trader's Remorse, where a lot of defectors go to kind of reform and become New Republic. So this is kind of a fun one to read if you're really into Starfighter combat. But you can definitely tell that this is the beginning of a trilogy. So take that as you will. I'm hoping that the next two books are better. I'm hoping now that we've got the characters established, when we get into book 2, we can just take off with the story and go. Kind of like what we did in Life Debt with the Aftermath trilogy. So we'll see. But guys, if you've read the book, let me know in the comment section below. What did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you looking forward to it? Are you not looking forward to it? Is it one you're going to read? Is it one you're not going to read? I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know. I'd love to hear it.